Can't we all just get along? Welcome to the presentation that will help you understand different types of relationships between countries. This presentation will cover learning target number 2. I can describe the relationships between countries. In general, we will think about the different types of relationships that countries might have with one another, referencing several specific vocabulary terms from your learning targets. We'll start by thinking about the different types of relationships that you have in your life. We have our family members, those close, enduring relationships. Sometimes we may disagree with the members of our family, but we know they're always there for us, no matter what. We also have our BFFs, our best friends forever, through thick and thin, who've seen us at our best and at our worst, and still like us anyway. There's also that one person you have just never been able to get along with, no matter what. There are those more general acquaintances, the people you know by sight, you typically know their name, but you're not really close. There are also the people that you interact with for a particular purpose, like that girl who's now in your learning target group. There are people that you work with to achieve a common goal, like the kids on your soccer team, as well as the broader groups to which you belong, like all of the other kids who go to St. Charles North High School. And who can forget about that kid in your neighborhood who you may not totally like, but he has a pool. Similarly, countries also develop different relationships with other countries. Consider the United States. The U.S. has their family, their BFFs, those close relationships that last the longest. There's that one country, Iran, they just can't seem to get along with. And hey there, Saudi Arabia, that one kid they hang out with just because he has a pool. In all seriousness, though, how do we actually characterize the different types of relationships that we see between countries? The first type of relationship that we can talk about is an alliance. In an alliance, countries may make agreements with each other that they will send their military to help the other if they get into a war situation. It may, however, be more of an economic alliance in which they agree to exchange services or trade goods or encourage their people to open businesses in one another's countries. These are your BFFs. I have your back if you need help or if things get nasty between you and your enemies. I am there for you. Countries may also have a more diplomatic relationship, where they have similar ideologies and tend to see things eye to eye. They communicate with each other often. They tend to have similar types of governments and economies, or at the very least, they're compatible. Their people have similar cultural values. Even if there are differences, however, they typically manage to avoid conflict by talking through any issues that do in fact emerge. These are the people with whom you get along. You're not necessarily BFFs, but you run in the same general crowd. In contrast, countries may have relationships that are openly hostile with one another. These are countries where there may be an ideological clash that has led to some type of security or even economic threat. They may be having a difficult time communicating with one another. These are countries that struggle to see eye to eye. Often what happens in these situations is that there's a buildup of weapons in order to show their strength and intimidate the other into backing down. Sometimes there are direct threats, either economic or military, involved in this relationship, and sometimes actual conflict emerges. This is a situation where we don't like each other. We might fight, and it will not be pretty. Sometimes countries may have a relationship in which they respect one another's sovereignty. What this means is that sometimes countries deeply disapprove of the other's actions. However, the actions of the other country don't really affect their own people, their own economy, or their own security. Therefore, they tend to just let the other country do what it wants without interference. A country's right to rule over itself without interference is called sovereignty. Sometimes a country will respect another country's sovereignty because doing so helps the initial country meet one of its own national interests, as is the case with the United States and Saudi Arabia. Although we may not always like the way Saudi Arabia treats some of its citizens, ultimately we have an economic interest in the region. With respecting sovereignty, I don't like what you're doing, but I really don't want to get up in your business. It's also possible that two countries have no real relationship. A lot of countries in the world don't really have a specific relationship with one another. They may belong to common organizations, such as the United Nations, but they don't really have many direct dealings with one another. Yeah, we live in the same world, and sometimes we end up in the same situations, but really, I'm just kind of doing my thing, and you're really doing yours. Countries may also take an approach of isolation or isolationism. This is a situation where a country makes no attempt to communicate with other countries. It may even actively ban its people from having access to outside information. It shows no interest in trading with other countries and may even work to build up its military to protect itself from outside influence. Isolationist countries, those are your loners. Moving forward, we'll work to consider some examples of these different types of relationships in practice, as well as consider what might be some of the costs and benefits of cultivating these types of relationships in the world. In the meantime, the end.